So Scott is going first here. Yeah, Scott, as Matt was saying, super nice guy. I think from the Philly area, just really down to earth, and but also just really strong strategist. Always has a plan up his sleeve. I feel like whenever I play him, even if he's down. So it will be fun to watch him for the first time on stream, and it'll be fun to watch Michael again too.
Absolutely. Again, for those joining later or who missed the stream yesterday, Michael Fagan represents Montreal, Quebec, one of many outstanding Canadian Scrabble players we have here at the tournament. We love our Canadians, and we've had several Canadian champions as well.
Yeah, I mean, it is the North American Scrabble Players Association for a reason. We like to include people at north of the border. I now live in Canada, actually, so it's weird for me to say north of the border now. But
because you are north of the border. So Scott, in typical fashion, I swear most of the games we've had on stream, somebody's drawn the Q on the first turn. Scott's drawn the Q without any U, without an I to make QI. So he's going to do what I think many people would do in exchange here. I would have thrown back OQW. He elected, I think, to throw back an A as well. But there's nothing wrong with doing that. You know, you don't want to get bogged down by too many vowels this early in a game. Michael Fagan is probably not super excited to see that first turn exchange because he's a letter away from a number of 8s. But unfortunately, he's not going to be able to make that happen. So he's also going to exchange 2 tiles, just the EI, which I think is absolutely standard here as well.
Yeah, I mean, for both, there were definitely some options. Like, you could have played Wiesen, keeping the Q with Scott's turn for 26, for instance, and Michael could have played GIE. But yeah, they're basically the same as exchanging. So I think it's a preference thing to some extent. If you'd like to take a few points right away, or if you want to just set yourself up for a likely bingo on a future turn right away.
I expect out of this turn, Scott's pulled into one of the top bingo stems, AEINRS, but unfortunately he's got a U to go with it. Scott, I'm sure, is aware there are no available 7s in that rack, though he may take just a minute or two to double check his knowledge. Again, that stream really gets in your head. You do not want to miss a bingo on the stream. But I expect we see Scott exchange 1 or maybe 2, either exchange the U or exchange the U and maybe the I or A on top of that. There we go, trade 1, and we are now 3 turns in to a potential 6-pass scenario in Scrabble. If both players score 0 for 3 consecutive turns, the game automatically ends. So I don't think we're going to get to that
consecutive turns.
3 more consecutive turns, yes. I think Michael Fagan's going to make a play here. Oh, he's changing 2, so that's 4 zeros. But Scott absolutely is going to bingo out of this rack. This is, I wasn't going to say that on the air because it has to do with my computer password, but yeah, this is the ultimate bingo rack in Scrabble. If you don't have a blank, there are still 9 available bingos out of AEINRST. And finally, Scott is going to get his bingo down, and that I that he floats is going to give Michael back debiting. So, kind of feeling each other out, or debating as well. Yes, absolutely. So feeling each other out, you know, taking our time, but finally each player is going to start this game with a bingo. Scott electing to play anestry, which I believe is a plural version of a period of not having sexual intercourse. No S on anestry, and then Michael's going to punch right back with debating. So 0, 0, 0, 0, and then some fireworks for us here on board 1 at the Scrabble Players Championship.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Scott there, would you pass on the retains turn ever? I mean, I know he just insta-played the bingo, but given that it was already 4 passes in and 6 would end the game, it basically depends on if you think Michael has a blank or not.
Right. The way that would work is if we did see a 6th pass in a row or a 6th score of 0, each player would have the letters on their rack subtracted from their current score, and the game would end. So because of that, Scott would have had -7 points, and if Michael had chosen to pass or exchange one more time, he would have had a little bit more than that. He would have minus 11 or minus 11 if my mental math is correct. So Scott would have won, but Michael, I'm certain, because he didn't have just 1 point tiles, would have been forced to make a play out of its last draw. I see in the chat, impressive contrast in the post-bingo draws. Somehow Michael drew just another incredible rack, whereas Scott drew WWCG, a bunch of garbage. So Scott's at least going to be able to score out of that, and Michael's going to hit him with another bingo. As far as options for what Michael's going to play, I don't see any double doubles from the N, so he'll have to settle for something a little bit lower scoring than that, but certainly just numerous options for Michael, and he may take a couple more moments to figure out what exactly the best and highest scoring option is for him.
Yeah, so I think tertials is the other idea that jumps out to me, at least through starting with the T in an S3. It's going to be his highest scoring bingo, and it looks like he has that aligned at this point. So I'd expect tertials to come down fairly quickly.
Yes, Michael's got it set up on his rack. I wonder if this pause is just taking a little extra time to make sure he's not missing a double-double, or perhaps he's having a little bit of doubt. Maybe he's double-checking because maybe that word doesn't take an S, but I think he's going to pull the trigger on it now. There he goes. And man, Scott, CCGG. That is CG is some really incredible anti-synergy in Scrabble. Those letters do not mix well at all, and Scott's got 2 of both of them. So tough break for him, especially as Michael pulls another very, very high probability bingo rack on him.
Yeah, it's tough, but Scott does have a word set up that does get rid of a lot of that clunk. He has gamic set up to make agamic through the A in tertials. So both gamic and agamic are good. I think it might be referring to gametes. I could be wrong. And it looks like he's going to play that.
So that's going to help him clear out some of this. Never thrilled to hold on to another CG, but you got to do what you got to do. Michael, it looks like, is pulled into a J, so he'll be able to score some points with that, but I don't think he's got anything absolutely devastating out of that rack.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything crazy right away, at least. So one option is he could play through the R in tertials to make Jura or Jurat. Those are 2 plays that maintain pretty synergistic leaves of either EIT or EITT.
Yeah, I think that's going to end up being the play here, is through that R. We'll see if he decides to play Jurat for 3 additional points, kind of unbalancing his rack and holding on to EIT, which is a little bit volatile, or if he plays a little more conservatively and plays just Jura. Intuitively, you want to undouble those T's, especially if you're going to get 3 extra points, but EITT is, I think, a much stronger leave than EIT, even with the double T. So he's probably thinking about those options. He might be looking to see, hey, is there any other thing I can do that maybe scores a little bit better? But here he goes. He's pulling the trigger on Jurat. He is taking the 3 extra points. And I hope this doesn't backfire. I've always found that holding on to more vowels than consonants can go one of 2 ways. You either end up bingoing or you end up scoring like 12. And so I try to avoid putting myself in those situations when I can. But it's totally defensible for sure to take the extra points here. I think I would have done what Michael did as well, but it's very scary drawing into vowels like that. And sure enough, Michael does end up picking 2 vowels and a Q, and now he's got kind of an unbalanced rack that's not going to score the best for him next turn.
Yeah, luckily for him, there are a few spots to dump QI for above 20 points, so that is fairly likely to come down. One thing to note is that right now, this board, I think, in a lot of ways, compared to a lot of the other games we've seen, has ability to access basically every quadrant of the board, which is nice. A lot of the other games we've seen, there were plays right away that really constricted what the board could do. I remember Shook SUQ came down early one game yesterday to restrict a quadrant of the board. But here, I think all the quadrants could be accessible by the end of the game. So we could have this really spread out space, and it might allow for a player to make a comeback because there are options all over. So as Scott plays Glam, which really nice play, keeping a very synergistic leave of CEL. I'm a fan of that for sure.
He's finally worked his way out of the dreck that was the CCGG jail. Another option there was Gleam in the same spot, but that does take the front hook of an A. So Chad is saying maybe we could have had a knowledge check. Open that spot up and see if Michael's aware and notices the hook and able to play the hook, or maybe you're setting it up for yourself. But Michael Fagan is a very solid player. I don't think you want to mess with that here. Against a lower rated player, I do think I would consider an option like that, but this is board one of a national championship. You're not able to win knowledge checks very often. Michael's going to go ahead and dump the cue as we expected, and Scott has pulled into a really interesting looking rack. There's going to be scoring opportunities for him out of CEKLLYZ. Morris, what's jumping out to you right away?
Yeah, I'm just starting to take it all in. I think I might actually keep the Z this turn. Something like Lick through the I and Agamic looks good at first glance. Oh, but now I see Zek there too, making ZA, EM, and KI, and that's definitely going to be, I think, the high score, or if I had to guess, for 59 points.
59 points. Man, Scrabble's a devastating game because a lot of the time these little, I wouldn't say no-brainer plays, but like you don't have to think very hard to find a 3-letter Z word and just stack it, and you can crush some spots with these words. So Scott definitely going to do some diligence here and look at different spots, make sure he's not missing anything incredible. But yeah, Zach I think is going to come down.
Yeah, but it looks like he has Lazy aligned on his set of letters. Lazy does score, I think, 23 fewer, so that is a bit of a sacrifice. But CEKL is a really solid leave, especially with multiple S's and ending S's, 8 lanes available on the board. That will bingo a lot of the time. I think I would still play Zek, but Lazy is definitely not a lazy man's play.
Yeah, I think he wants to hold on to that CK synergy. He might have been looking at the spot in the bottom left corner where you can play Ink and overlap that G and score pretty substantially there. He may have just overlooked Zek as well. I think if he saw both options, he'd pounce on the 59 points, even with the subpar leave that Zek holds. But looks like Scott has drawn into a pretty balanced rack, which I think was the plan after a play like Lazy. And Michael seems to be struggling now with too many vowels.
Yeah, and it's going to be interesting to see what Michael does here. I mean, a lot of plays could just open the board wildly, right? You can play P, P-E-E, and make off of the W, making we as well, W-E, to set up your E to make Epi, like the little sword in fencing. But that is definitely a risky option, and it's unclear. I mean, Lazy could suggest to Michael that Scott was keeping mostly consonants there. He wouldn't have necessarily thought that Scott's keeping E there, but E is the most common tile in the bag, so it isn't a terrible... I feel like if I'm making a play to set up an E, I have to be pretty darn sure my opponent isn't holding an E, and I don't think I would be sure enough based on Lazy to do that.
Absolutely not. Yeah, you can't infer that Scott doesn't have an E after a play like that. It scores very well. I'm just not seeing a lot of scoring options for Michael. He's going to have to do some philosophical thinking here. How do I want to shape this board? Because it is these turns where none of the options stand out and score significantly that really dictate what the shape of the board is. You need to capitalize on these turns, open what you want or close what you want in these instances. Michael is ahead by 22 points and it's his turn, but he's not going to be able to score well, and I think he's about to get destroyed. Scott is sitting on YOCKED, and that's going to score just a boatload of points. I believe it's 57. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Michael play something just like JOE or JEE or maybe Jeep in this instance. If I'm Michael, I'm concerned. I don't want to get caught up fishing because there's really only one conducive line to play bingos easily. Now, that line is incredible. It's down to the S in tertials. You can play across in the bottom row. And an 8-line ending in an S is just, oh man, it is so, so juicy. So I think you can rationalize fishing here as Michael without having to, excuse me, you can justify fishing here without having to open additional lines. There's not many worlds where Scott blocks that S unless Scott bingos. So I think you can take your shot. Don't open anything else. Make your little fish and hope Scott leaves the S alone. What do you think, Morris?
Yeah, and just for newer viewers on the stream, whenever we say fish, all that means is get rid of a few tiles that aren't as conducive to bingos to leave really good tiles to hopefully get a huge score the next turn. So, yeah, I think Matt's analysis was spot on. There are definitely, I mean, to be fair, there are 2 S lanes on the board, so if you have a 7 that can be pluralized, you can be guaranteed a spot on the board if you don't block either right now, if you want to go that route. So I'd understand if Michael does that, but his lead is evaporating, and Scott seems to have heftier tiles, so you can't start getting too cute with sacrificing a lot of points here.
The issue is you're not sacrificing points in as much as you legitimately just can't score them out of a rack like this. So many one-pointers, so many vowels, and you are bingo prone enough that it's hard to justify playing like a 5 or 6 letter word over something just like a 2 or 3 tile play. I totally didn't see that second S until right now. I hate bingoing for 59. And so I think I'm a little bit blind to those lanes where you score for 59. But yes, there are 2 available S's. So if Michael can leave both of those alone, I think a play like Joe or G, depending on what whether he prefers to hold EEPRT or EOPRT, that's what to do. Michael elects to score more, but he's holding on to now a very volatile EEERT. And if he pulls vowels here, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. He'll be in the same situation he was just in. And now Scott pulls the trigger on Yacht. Nice play. Good knowledge of a 4 to make a 6. And for those of you who are up-and-comers at Scrabble, I strongly advise as you go through the 3, 4, 5-letter words, pay attention to their part of speech. It's very important to know, hey, is Yacht a verb or is it a noun? Can I put that ED or not? Michael got bailed out aggressively. I think that EEERT leave is not a good one. And yet he pulled a bingo anyway and got exactly the letter he needed after Scott's play. So Scott can't be super happy about that, but Michael's got to be elated right now.
Yeah, I mean, even though Scott is down 67, the good news is, and we'll see what he draws to his leave of HL, is that there's a ton of bingo opportunities now. As we said before, there are the 2 lanes that end in S's. Now, Michael created a lane on column N. That's the second to last column. So there's definitely a lot of opportunity to bingo, and Scott actually drew very synergistic letters. So he's not in that bad of shape, even though Harold's, I don't think, plays anywhere here. He should be close to something at a minimum right now. And
yeah,
actually, well, heraldist is a word, apparently.
Heraldist?
IST. Heraldist. Someone
Heraldist. Wow.
Through the I in Anestri and the T in Gerat. So,
we're not going to see that played. Scott is a fantastic player, but Scrabble players don't tend to study 9s, and that, to me, just doesn't really sound like a word. So,
yeah, and someone said heraldist has been missed on board 1 of Nationals before, so it has happened already. It's tough to find 9-letter words, especially disconnected 9-letter words. It just is so much less likely to get 2 correct tiles in their places than 1 correct tile to make an 8-letter word, that players don't study 9s nearly as often. The payoff is not nearly enough for the amount of time they devote to studying.
This is an interesting turn now for Scott. We're going to have to assume he misses the bingo heraldist, and beyond that, the options are really challenging here for him. You want to obviously try to score some and stay in this game, but what do you do? Are you down enough that you consider opening the board here, or do you assume that the 3 lines available are going to stay available? I could totally see a case for just plunking the H in the bottom right side of the board, making HE and HE for 20 points. Now that's going to set off a lot of red flags for Michael, but that line to the S on that bottom triple is going to be really hard to justify blocking when you can only score a little bit. Maybe he can play something like Fawn, FAUN, and Finn to try to address it partially, but he'll still be sacrificing some points probably to make that happen.
Yeah, I think actually if you're Scott, it's fine to telegraph that you have good bingo letters and force Michael to actually think about it for what to do. One other thing to keep in mind is even though Scott has an S, none of the bingo lines we've mentioned can be a pluralization. You can't stick an S onto anything, so he can't get any sevens ending in S. He needs an S to be in the middle of a word. Luckily for him, even though 2 of the lanes end in S, and he does have LES and LESS, less, is a common suffix that could pair with a lot of 4-letter combos at the beginning. So he might be thinking about what's the best way to fish or just take off a few tiles to optimize his bingo chances the next turn. And he might be settling on just playing the H. It looks like he's separated that out from the rest of his tiles at this point.
And there we do get the 20-point plunk. We'll see what Scott pulls into this leave, but it is a very, very bingo-prone leave. Oh, wow. Michael's able to hit back with painful, and that does address the big S line, so Scott can't be very happy to see the S go away, especially not for that high a score, as Michael's able to triple that F and then double the whole word on top. Oh, man, I don't think that's the pull Scott wanted into this rack either.
Yeah, another R is normally a pretty good tile, but here, yeah, it doesn't quite work out for him. So,
Larders is valid, but it does not play anywhere.
Yeah, so I'm guessing he's going to go underneath painful to make lard and making 3 2-letter words with that. For those newer to the game, the twos, learning the twos, there's only 101 of them, I think, or maybe there's a few more now.
105, I believe now.
105, yeah. Learning those 105 words, and you can learn them in a day, probably adds 40 plus points to your score without knowing them. And you often know a lot of them. You know hi, you know bye, you know we, etc. So he opts to play lard, and 32 points. It's not a bad score at all, and keeps a great ERS leave. But yeah, he might be wishing his choice of Anestri was a different one of the sevens in that rack that could pluralize. Now, I think Scott's choice at the time made a ton of sense. You want to give your opponents as few shots as possible, but it happens to be that he really needs the S lanes at this point.
Michael's now picked up into 3 ends and the classic UV combo, so he's going to get to decide what to do with this. Again, he can try and maybe address the S in an Estri, but I think when you have a lead in Scrabble, there are 2 ways to hold on to it. One is to play aggressive defense and ensure your opponent does not bingo no matter what, and 2 is, okay, you can bingo, I don't really care, I'm just going to score so much, I'm going to turn on the guns and run. And score as fast as I can. Both of those are reasonable approaches, and it's up to you as a player to decide which one you're going to take. We'll see what Michael decides here with this rack and this lead.
Yeah, it's interesting. I am looking. So at this point, both blanks are unseen as well. So I think if you're Michael, I think Venus, Venous, should be valid. And that does get rid of 5 of your tiles, which is with 26 unseen or 19 left in the game, 19 in the bag. 2 blanks unseen probably makes it so that you want to start doing turnover as a strategy if you have a bunch of only okay options. Now, granted, by Scott playing key 2 turns ago, that could suggest to Michael that Scott already has one of the blanks. But I think if you're Michael, you want to go for turnover here.
I think I wouldn't call this a mistake necessarily, but a big thing to be thinking about right now is that Lard came down very fast for Scott. And I think if Scott did have a blank, he would have spent much longer with those tiles, really spinning them around, trying to figure out what words are available. So Lard played as quickly as it was, telegraphs to me that, nah, I just had a bingo prone sevens rack, and none of them fit. If I'm Michael, I'm okay with Scott bingoing down to the S in a nest tree more than I am him bingoing overlapping reseated. If he does play to the S in a nest tree, he's floated a tile in a triple word line. I'm going to be able to pounce on that spot for 40 points, and Scott's bingo is only going to score 59 to 65. So I'm A-okay with that happening. It's more the bingo next to reseated that may not give good counter plays that I'm worried about. So I've seen in chat somebody's recommended none in next to reseated. I'm okay with that play as well. You could try to sling that V over there because nothing overlaps a V, and really try to just kill that side of the board if you want to. But I also totally understand the rationale behind a play like Venus. You are going to block off the S. You're going to turn over 5 tiles and take some shots at the blanks. And Morris, how many tiles are left in the bag currently?
So there are 19 in the bag, 26 unseen. From
19 in the bag and 2 are blank. So yeah, if I'm Michael at this point, I don't know that Scott had one with his last play. I would like to play as many of these tiles as possible. I think it would be a little bit too aggressive to try to exchange 6 or 7 here to go for one, but I do like the idea of making a longer play and trying to pull a blank here.
Yeah, and so the other key tile that still hasn't been played, I guess, is the X. There really isn't any spot on the board for the X, though. So normally the X is a tile that gives you an easy 30 to 40 point bailout. This game, it could actually slow you down from either player's perspective. So the X might not be the kind of tile players want to draw closer to this endgame. Now, granted, if one gets a bingo, that could entirely change the shape of the board. But that is something to monitor.
Absolutely. Poor Scott, man. How often do you go from having heralds to fishing into ADELRS to just like not even being close to a bingo all of a sudden? He's picked up 5 vowels now, and it is going to be challenging for Scott. It's a double whammy too, because with those blanks unseen, you want to turn over tiles, but when you're holding AEIRS, you feel compelled to hold on to those letters no matter what. So Scott's probably not going to be able to make a long play here. He's probably looking to drop 2 of the O's in some place, but he's only going to have probably 2 opportunities to draw a blank after that. Not that he needs one to bingo with AEIRS or a similar leave, but that's tough, man. Poor Scott. Most players would have drawn a bingo right now. But as we've seen on board 1 over and over, players are making some curious decisions with the letters they decide to draw. I just seen so many top experts decide that it's a good idea to draw a bunch of vowels, and I don't understand why they keep doing this.
Yeah. It was funny enough. Yesterday, I was talking with some friends who were watching the stream, and they thought you were hilarious every time, Matt, when you made that joke. So keep it up.
I will make that same joke about 8 more times. So if you like it, great. And if you don't, I'm not going to apologize or back down.
So it looks like Michael's optimizing points in a lot of ways here. He probably sees that even though he's holding 3 ends, which you never really want to do, there are no more ends in the bag at least. So he can't get a 4th one. So 23 points, it's the most points available to him. So, and it does give him a 78-point cushion.
As we said, you have 2 options here. You can run or you can try to play defense. And it looks like Michael is just trying to score as much as he can. That's very curious, though, because that NNNU leave is so inflexible. That Y is going to help him out a lot as he pulls options like Tunney. But I think that play is going to give Scott some ins to this game that he wouldn't otherwise have. Scott, we might see just dump like WOO or something that really opens his board wide open. Does let Michael potentially hit him back with some counters, but he needs to open this board. He needs to try to get a bingo line pretty quickly.
Yeah, and he might be opting for Rue making some two-letter words parallel to the ESE in reseated. That looks like, at first glance, that it might close the board. It actually opens the board a lot for the tiles Scott has, because an S can go before OS to make SOS, and an E can go before RE to make ERE. So it actually sets up a lane that an S can end in. So I completely understand the logic, and he's probably looking at the pool and seeing that there are a fair amount of consonants and the blanks too. So I'm fine with Rue here, even though it's not as good for uh, just straight up leave. It probably is better for board shaping, and it scores 7 more than something like Woo.
Whoa! Blank on the 3-tile pull for Scott. Wow. Oh, wow. We have a game on our hands, folks. Oh, my goodness. That was incredible. All right. I take back everything I said about questioned Scott's ability to draw tiles. That was incredible. That was clutch. Well done, Scott.
Yeah, so is Scott's strategy of pulling both blanks, or do you approve of that?
I do approve. Yes, that is a Division 1 play.
Yeah. So I think windages is an option here. Weak side also. There are definitely some bingos starting with the W at a minimum. If he doesn't see that, things like de-airing through the N in the first N in Tunny could come down as well. He'd prefer to play through the W just because it's a few more points and likely doesn't give as dangerous of a spot back to Michael. But a bingo's a bingo here, and he's down by 76 points. Any bingo will put him within 10 points of the lead, and I think he's right now just looking or counting how many tiles are in the bag. There are 8 in the bag, so he will leave 1, which is really ideal. You don't want to give your opponent a tempo advantage when it's basically a tie game in an endgame, so 8 in the bag is really clutch for Scott here. He got the blanks at the last time you really want them, aside from the end game itself.
I wonder if it's insane or reasonable to consider waiting with a rack this incredible with both blanks. What if you just bingo out? I think if Scott bingos now, he is still the underdog to win this game. If he plays something like Windages or Islanded through the second N and Tunny making some overlaps, I wonder if it's appropriate to think about waiting, opening a couple lines, just trying to score a little bit and playing a bingo out to catch Michael with points on his rack. He's got to see that V, that F, that X unseen. There's a B and an H unseen to him as well. And I wonder what the best way for Scott to win this game is. Bingo now and go into a 1 in the bag pre-endgame situation in an even situation, or wait. We'll see what he decides to do. It'd be very hard to pass up a bingo on this rack on board 1, but I wonder if he wins the game more often by passing it here.
Yeah, that's interesting. So for newer players to Scrabble, the high-level strategy concept we're thinking about here is if you know with 2 blanks you're likely to bingo soon. You can bingo this turn even. But if you can net more points over 2 or 3 turns by not bingoing this turn and taking points, or maybe creating a spot that's really high scoring for a bingo that your opponent can't block, that could be a better 2 or 3 turn sequence than bingoing right now and then be left with a bunch of dreck that you can't do much with next turn. So if you're trying to optimize not over 1 turn, but over your last 3 turns, if you think the game will end in 3 turns, not bingoing then becomes an option.
Wild. Scott is a very creative and clever player, and I bet he is considering doing this right now, but it is so hard to do windages plays for a good score. But I just think, he's going to basically tie the game with this bingo and going into a 1 in the bag situation where your rack is random and Michael's had a couple turns to try to groom his. I don't know. I don't think he wins the game very often bingoing right now.
Yeah, so I think he could also be wondering if the X is unseen to him. He might be thinking which of the bingos minimizes X counterplay. Uh, a lot of them, I think, don't really give back anything threatening. Windages does give a play underneath the E and the G in it, so Ox could go underneath. But something like weak side, I think, isn't quite as destructive if the X comes down. So a lot of interesting ideas. I think you have to assume last turn that Michael isn't holding the X there. If I had to guess, uh, I mean, maybe Michael's keeping OX after Tunny to set up Oxy, but it seems like I'd guess that Scott is thinking either about whether I should bingo or not bingo, or if I am going to bingo, how do I minimize X damage?
He might honestly need X damage to be available, though. Michael is got the tempo advantage. You know, it's his turn after this bingo. Scott's still going to be down 2 after Windages, or maybe 4 after Islanded. Scott doesn't seem to have almost any options for non-bingos that score reasonably well, unless you do something crazy like ADS all the way on the left side, making SMU, making Ado, making AL. But I think you want to hold on to at least the S here to go with your blanks. I don't know. ADS could be a play, but it looks like he is just going to go ahead and play a bingo here, and it's going to come down to a tight end game where whoever draws the better stuff is going to win. Oh no, he's playing a Stanid, which is going to give Michael back Oxy for 50 points.
Too bad.
Oof, that's going to be probably game over. Michael's going to be left on top of a VF, but ouch, that's going to hurt when Michael's able to come back. Can we get verification on those blanks? I don't know what else they could be, but maybe I'm overlooking something. I think Michael's looking at it right now.
I think that has to be a Stanid. And Scott draws. It looks like he's leaving an E in the bag for Michael. So I think Michael does have time, so he's probably just making sure there are no out bingos for Scott. You don't want to empty the bag and then for over 50 points and then have your opponent bingos, so it's probably wise to make sure of that before playing. But yeah, this game I think should be locked up for Michael here. Yeah.
All right, we have confirmed that the blanks are TO for Astanid. Michael was not looking at the blank slip. He was looking at, he has these custom tracking slips that are small, and he had his tracking in his hand.
Yeah, so he plops down Oxy. That should seal up the win for him.
Man, it's tough because Islanded would have given back exactly the same play in different overlaps, but Oxy still fits next to that. So tough situation for Scott. He did pull both of the blanks, but do you play Windages? Do you bingo through the N, or do you wait and not bingo? You know, the world will never know what the right answer technically is, but this is what Scott elected to do, and unfortunately he got burned by the X right away.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough because as Matt was saying, the non-bingos didn't score that much. And the fourth option of opening a really high scoring potential lane that only you could hit by having both blanks, that wasn't really an option on this board, at least as I saw. So really those sorts of situations where you want to create a little advantage, it just might have not been available on this board. And I think he made a completely reasonable play. It looks like he had Hubris set up to the S and Astani briefly there. That is the top scoring sequence by the engine for this endgame, but it will not be enough to come back.
And some high-level play on board one again. I've been so impressed by the Scrabble we've seen here at the Scrabble Players Championship in Baltimore, Maryland. Again, this game features Scott Appel and Michael Fagan. Scott was in first coming into this round, but Michael will be knocking him off. And of the 3 6-1 players we had, Scott, he's about to lose. We had Michael, he's about to win. And the one remaining 6-1 was Joey Kraftchick, who we got to watch briefly yesterday.
Yeah, we only say briefly because Joey played so quickly, right? He
That's
won
right.
his game.
He won his
Like,
game. I think he used like 9 minutes on his clock and drew like 17 power tiles or something.
yeah, so in the meantime, while Scott is setting up, we'll plug the North American Scrabble Players Association. I just threw a link in the Twitch chat if you want to play your own games, maybe make your own bingos like a Nestreep, Astani, Reseated, etc. Go to that link to sign up for tournaments.
As a reminder, we've elected to shake things up for round 9. We will be pivoting away from Division 1 and heading over to Division 2, where we'll watch 2 previous school Scrabble champions, Knox Daniel and Leo McKenna, face off in an annotated game. There's some pretty substantial money in Division 2 as well, and I expect to see both of these kids up in Division 1 very, very shortly, probably next year at the Scrabble Players Championship.
Yeah, and I think Knox is actually a local-ish player. He doesn't live in Baltimore. He lives, I think, in Virginia. So there are a lot of players in the Maryland, Virginia, D.C. area, especially former school Scrabble players. So it's always good. And yeah, I think Leo's from D.C., from Stefan Fatsis's club, who is the author of Word Freak, for those not familiar.
Leo, I'm showing, is from L.A., but I don't know these kids well enough to tell you where they're from. That's just what I see in cross tables. Maybe chat can help us out and help us discern some information on these kids. We see Hyrie come down instead of Hubris. Michael's going to make a play, and Scott's going to be able to go out with BU somewhere for sure. And that'll end this game for us.
Yeah, and actually, Hyrie netted the same amount as Hubris in a 2-turn sequence for this endgame. So, still a great option Scott found, but just wasn't quite enough to catch Michael's huge X bomb at the end.
Man, we've really lucked out on board 1 with the games that are annotated. We've seen games that look like they're going to be blowouts, and yet these clever players keep finding ways to crawl their way back into games and make something out of them. Scott, it looked like, was dead in the water for a while, but he kept fighting. He picked up the blanks and just couldn't quite make it happen with that Oxy play. But I've seen over and over, we've had some great games here on board 1. Those of you at home, you've been treated to a nice one. Hoping I didn't jinx anything by saying that. Knock on wood right now.
And I see a question in the chat of, I was going to answer who are the commentators. I'm Morris Greenberg. I'm here with Matt Kanek. We will actually have some more commentators coming in and out these next few days. So be on the lookout for that. It's definitely a lot of fun to commentate nationals now, especially in the past few years since the pandemic started. We've been able to do a lot more remote commentary and give you all a lot of cool coverage that way.
Yeah, I would be in this playing room if it were at all feasible for me, but I am a student in pharmacy school wrapping up my doctorate right now, and I have to be at a hospital Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday this week doing my rotation. So I'm stuck here. I'm getting as involved as I can, and I'll be following along on my phone in between patient rounds, but commentary is all I got this time. Maybe next time I'll be trying to win this thing myself.
Yeah, I've just accepted I can't win this thing at all, so I'm very happy analyzing people who can win this thing at this point.
As someone in chat mentioned yesterday, Scrabble is so much easier to watch and talk about when you have anagrammers, when you have chat, when you have Quackle, than it is to actually play. And that is absolutely true. I threw away my shot to cash at a Nationals because I played a phony 4 on a turn where I could make any valid play to win the game. And I played a phony 4. So all I had to do was make a word, and I failed to do that, and then I didn't cash at a Nationals. But maybe one day I will. And Cesar, if you're out there right now, you are welcome for that cash, and big fat hola to you as well.
Yeah, and so we'll see if Scott and Michael will continue to be on close to the top of the standings in the next few rounds. They could be coming back soon. In the meantime, we will take a short break in between rounds as we set up with two players in Division Two. Uh, keep on watching our stream, ask good questions, give good suggestions in the chat. We'll talk to you soon.